So we will call it to order, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Charlie Brown.
Oh, that's just wrong.
I'm sorry.
That's.
All right. Take your hand over your heart and begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to guests, so you're all welcome. Motion for the adoption of the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, staff presentation, Dr. Mannon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the board, before I start the presentation, Mr. Stephan was ill last Monday night, so I have for him a gavel signifying the dates of being the past president, and we want to thank him for his service.
Still doesn't
And
trust
now
me.
he'll use the gavel. Demonstrate.
No, don't.
Oh, that was
Yes.
wrong of me.
In fact, this one will never get used.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Reagan loved that gavel.
She wants a bigger one.
You have one.
In the year 2009, Tom, we put together and placed it on the website a schedule for capital outlay and projects for measures Y and Z. What I have done is to go through, and I'll explain this a little bit for members of the audience. It follows a similar template to what we did for measures Y and Z, which are still on the website, which has really worked very well for us in terms of people in our community being able to pull that up and look at it and know exactly where we are in our building program in terms of which schools are planning and which schools are under construction. So, going on to our new bond measures, Measure T first. Remember, Measure T is unique in that it has funds for both construction and technology. And we discussed this during the campaign and explained this to the public. So, Measure T, in Phase 1, which is in 2015, at your January 20th board meeting, you will see measures, items on there, resolutions for your approval, so that we can go ahead and do the first issuance with Measure T, which would total $67 million available for construction. If you remember Y and Z, there were several issuances. For these two bonds, there will only be two issuances, one in 2015, which I just discussed, and then the second one in 2018, and there you can see the amounts, 67 and 47. Now, if you do the math real quick, that's not 144 million, because Measure T also has technology. So we laid that out for you so that you can see it's 5 million every 5 years, and these are the years of issuance for Measure T as it currently stands. And as you note, the district will be in a really good position out there in the future, all the way out to the year 2040, when the last issuance will occur for Measure T technology. So that provides funding all the way out. Now, Measure U, the smallest of the two measures, again, two issuances. First issuance in 2015 for $34 million. The second issuance in 2018 for $16 million. Again, that will also be on your board agenda for January 20th to actually approve the resolutions for the issuance of funds in 2015. Now, tied to those issuance are the projects. And we've gone through and looked at the projects and are recommending to you. Under Measure T, Phase 1, this is out of our first sale in 2015, the funding for security and safety. I'll just briefly remind folks what each of those are. Security and safety is made up of 3 large components. Video surveillance on our school sites. That's both the cameras and the monitoring devices. Fencing, and as you know, under Measures Y and Z, some fencing was provided, but it was generally at the front of the school, and that was all that was provided. So this will fill in on fencing and any additional fencing we may need to put in for safety issues. And then third, the emergency containers will all be replaced on the school sites. We also are looking at a couple other interesting things under safety and security, but I'll bring those back to you at a later time. Second would be elementary science labs. This is something our elementary principals are very excited about, to actually have a real science lab on each of our 17 campuses. Dr. Stowe and Dr. Kim have been looking at this in terms of the new generation science standards and actually having students at the elementary school level doing science experiments. Next are auditoriums. Remember, this one is a little different in that it's going to provide additional funding for modernization of the auditorium, the existing auditorium at Torrance High School. It provides for 3 new auditoriums for South, North, and West, since those 3 high schools have never had an auditorium. So they will get that with this. Next item is replace existing student lockers, and that's at the middle school and high school level. Remember when we went through with Measure Y, one of the sore spots, quite frankly, when you look at how good the schools look, was the old lockers. And those lockers do not work very well. Finally, under Phase 1, electrical, plumbing, and roofing as needed. Just a reminder that, as I had to remind some folks not long ago, the estimates for Measure Y were actually completed in 2006. We're now on the verge of 2015. So when we get to some of these outer schools out into the future, for example, roofing was not a part under Measure Y because in 2006 they didn't need roofing. Now, 2015-16, they may need some roofing. Electrical is always an issue that we have to overcome with the technology pieces. And as you know, when we bought the Chromebooks, we had to put in some more electrical. So we need electrical, and we plan for that with this, the ability to do that kind of thing. Phase 2 for Measure T would be in 2018. That is to renovate the auxiliary gyms at the high schools. Remember, under Measure Z, we renovate the main gym, but not the auxiliary gyms. So this is the auxiliary gyms. Upgrade irrigation systems. That's irrigation systems throughout the district on our fields. And finally, any electrical, plumbing, and roofing that may be needed as we look at Phase 2. So that is Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Measure T. Measure U, Phase 1, which would start almost immediately again, 2015. We anticipate the sale of bonds 1st of March. So the money, so to speak, will be in the county treasurer's office. First item, construct the Torrance Aquatic Center, which we need to do some work on in terms of what the location is going to be. But as our friend Charlie Brown indicated, he can build anything in 12 months. The other item under Phase 1, Measure U, are the middle school gyms. Remember, we put the gym at Hull Middle School, the only middle school that has a gym currently. This will provide 7 gyms, 1 for each of our middle schools. We are going to cost those out for you 2 different ways. One would be strictly a participant gym, no seating, which is what we have at Hull. Second, going to a participant gym, but maybe 4 to 5 rows of bleachers for spectators. So it'd only be a very small number of spectators, but some if they wanted to be there. Excuse me. Measure U Phase 2, again, that's 2018 for that issuance. Renovation of the elementary school playgrounds. There's a lot of work to do on that. As you know, our elementary school need that done. One of the things that we did discuss very clearly prior to the campaign and during the campaign is that in several instances, our elementary schools have upgraded their playgrounds through the years through PTA funding. I think we should be in charge of that, meaning this is a district expense and we should do it. And, you know, if our PTAs who do a great job out there want to do something to elaborate on the base that we'll give them, they certainly can and should do that if they wish to do it. But I think the elementary school playgrounds are our responsibility to do. The next item is replace the high school artificial surface on fields and tracks. If you recall, we passed measures Y and Z in 2008. And a great idea was to do the stadiums first so that we would have something to show, so to speak, for the community. And we did that. And so it's hard to believe, but we've now played 6 seasons on our artificial surface on the fields at all 4 high schools. Life expectancy is between 10 and 12 years for those surfaces, so they are going to need to be replaced within 4 to 6 years. This is an item for 2018, but quite frankly, you might not need this item in 2018. We might sell the bonds, but it might not actually go into work until 2020, depending, of course, on the actual need that we have at the school sites. And finally, something that our planning committee, who reviewed all of our plans, brought up was that the tennis courts are in pretty bad shape at all of our high schools, and so this would allow for the resurfacing of all of our tennis courts. Happy to answer any questions about measures T and U.
Mr. Wormers.
Dr. Mannon, the continued discussion I have with citizens in our community concerning security, I keep referring to cameras, fencing. I mentioned the containers when it comes up if I'm dealing with a PTA person. But beyond that, we're not talking razor wire. We're not talking.
Absolutely not.
We're not talking metal detectors, anything along those. Because I keep deferring. No, we're not going to do that. I don't want our school to look like a prison.
No.
None of that is in the pipeline or in the plans or any shape or form.
At all, and I think it's important, thank you, Mr. Wormers, for that question too, or comment. I think it's important that we really reflect who our community is. And I say that with some level of humiliation on my part, because
Humility.
I'm sorry, humility. Thank you. I can get humiliated quickly, though, Mr. Lee. But you know, there are many parents that have come up to me through the years when we've especially been doing modernization at their school sites, who have come up and basically said, you know, thank you. Because when you look at our school sites, I'm talking about now the school sites that have been modernized, they certainly don't look like a prison. And you know, for many of our parents, certainly safety and security is always high with their own children. But they don't want our schools to look like a prison, just like you indicated.
As Mr. Lee points out, I must be the bug light of humanity, I believe is the way you
bug
phrase
light
it. So
of
I get a fair
humanity.
quantity of the fringe. And I keep telling there's no way we could possibly secure our schools to the level that they have envisioned in their minds. So
No.
All right, I just want to make certain that this is,
No,
that, under a public environment, we're talking about this
Right.
like we should be.
And I think the other piece that goes along with this, and we certainly appreciate their assistance, as we move forward on this item, Chief Masuda, has worked closely with us since he has become the chief, has assigned a captain and a sergeant who know us very well to be on a committee that I'm chairing myself. So, we have expertise from the Torrance Police Department, which we take very seriously. We'll also have a consultant on this also, because we want the highest quality of video from the standpoint of also night video. And this was very important, by the way, to the citizens group, that whatever we buy provided clear resolution, so that when people did any damage to our school sites at night, we could simply turn over the tapes to the Torrance Police Department and have those people apprehended. That was extremely important to our parent groups out there, that's the way we would operate with that. And that is exactly what we intend to do.
Should I keep going? Because I got a couple other questions.
Yeah.
When we met at the STEM Award, we talked about gas at the elementary science labs. So we're actually providing butane Bunsen burners of any sort. I ran into one of our science teachers at a restaurant, and a middle school science teacher, and he asked me all kinds of questions about the elementary school science lab. I'm like, I don't know what makes you think I know this. The only thing I can tell you pretty certain is we're not going to have Bunsen burners. Is the only thing. I mean, can you elaborate a little bit on what the science lab for an elementary school looks like?
It looks exactly like the ones at the middle school.
Just doesn't have a Bunsen burner.
Has smaller furniture in it. Well, we haven't completely made that decision. I've turned that over to Dr. Stowe for research.
Oh, I may have to get back to this guy.
In terms of that's kind of where we are right now, but that's not a final decision. The question, Michael, was that I are talking about is that in our middle school and high school labs, which by the way are modular except the ones that were built in, and we buy them as modulars and then bring them in. It's the same thing with the elementary. The difference is the smaller furniture for smaller kids. But the question was, do we want gas hookups for the elementary science labs? If we don't have those, then it actually lowers the regulations we have to deal with. But there's a good question of, do elementary students really need gas hookups? Now, you need water and sinks and all those other kinds of things, but do you really need gas hookups? And that's a part that Dr. Stowe is in the middle of researching. Right now, we'd say no, but he's in the middle of researching that based on the next generation science standards. So whoever was asking you that, if he goes into his middle school science lab,
He's a middle school teacher.
yeah,
And-
other than the size of the desks and all, that's how it will look.
Okay, and he didn't seem to have an opinion whether we had gas or not. He didn't seem, I expected a negative reaction when I said we wouldn't have Bunsen burners, and he was fairly calm about it. So, the auditoriums, does that include lighting and sound?
Yes.
Okay, and the irrigation is not going to start till 2015. Any work on the irrigation systems?
I'm sorry, 2018.
2018.
Correct. Simply because we don't have all the dollars available to us. If you go back to the former slide, you can see that in Measure U, you have $34 million available in 2015, and then 16 available in Phase 2. And let me clarify on that for 1 minute, too. When we passed Y and Z, the type and the level of construction we were doing was not present in the city, let's say, for several years. And so there were folks in our community who somehow felt that we were immediately going to sell $355 million worth of bonds, and we could do all the schools at once. Well, if we sold $355 million worth of bonds for Y and Z, you wouldn't be paying that low tax rate that we're currently paying, because that's a part of how we work on the tax rate also, is the way that this is structured with that. And second of all, we simply couldn't do it. We know what our capacity is based on the past, and we are taxed to do more than 8 schools at a time. Connected to this, and we need to keep this in mind, is our major building programs of Y and Z are not stopping. So those programs are going to continue along with folding measures T and U in. Now, for the schools in the last phase, which is currently set for 2017, but I'm going to be bringing you back something to move those into 2016, then a measure such as the auditorium for West High School will just be planned into West High School. For North and South that are already done, those are brand new plans that are going to have to be submitted to DSA for.
And lastly, the most interesting part of Measures T and U to the public's point of view was the Aquatic Center. How much influence are we on the board going to have in what the Aquatic Center looks like? I've had a couple principals already ask me some questions that I couldn't answer. Do we have, I know we've got a budget of $15 million, and that should be adequate. But do we have any kind of idea what it's going to look like in any way, shape, or form? Or
Well,
are we going to be able to say what we want to see from a board seat, or how's that going to work?
You can, but I think there's a couple of pieces yeah.
I'm looking for a little more details, perhaps, other than a whole.
There's a couple of pieces to that. The one, certainly there'll be an exterior that is more in line with what architects like to do. Certainly, we'll provide that for you with, with whatever it ends up being. No, we don't have a plan for it right now. Beyond that exterior, then we're into some more technical pieces. And I have said this several times, and we already had one person from the community check with us to make sure that this is what we were really going to build, and that is that this is a competitive center. When you build competitive centers now, and I'm certainly not part of that swimming community that's competitive, but there are a lot of people that are. And, our vision right now is that there actually will be two pools, one pool that will be used for swimming and water polo. And by the way, when you get into this, from a competition standpoint, the water temperature needs to be within 2 degrees. It can't vary between more than that. Electronic touch pads, because you cannot set records without now having electronic touch pads that are run by the computer. Obviously, scoreboards that show those times for individuals with that. Also, if you're going to have competition swimming, then you're going to have a second pool, which is called the cool down warm-up pool, which allows the competitors to go in and either cool down or warm up, in that pool before they're in the competitive pool. What that really sets up, though, from a school district standpoint, is we could actually have 2 water polo matches going on at once. So, in the
So that's what our principal actually asked me. Is it going to be equivalent to a water polo and a place where we can actually swim laps side by side? Because his argument, his discussion, not so much an argument, was the fact that with a water polo and a swim team and 4 school sites, you could be running 8 cycles through this. He's trying to avoid going to the plunge at all.
Yeah, he's right.
So, and they're not going to overlap, and they're 2 separate.
No.
And I'm gonna make friends
Yeah,
tomorrow. I want to make a phone call.
there is a way to do it without having 2 pools, but they're called bulwarks, and you put those in, and you have to move them and do all of this, and they fail, is what happens after several years. So we really don't want to get into that. And this is really the setup that you would see in a competitive aquatic center.
This is exactly what I was asked about. I'm like, I was able, because it was one of our employees able to,
Yeah.
I got no idea. So.
Yeah, and when you think about it, how much this is actually going to be used, because each of our high schools will have swimming and water polo, girls and boys. So then you're looking at 16 teams.
I hadn't thought of the girls and boys.
Yes,
I hadn't thought of that.
so it's 16 teams that would actually be using that facility.
To follow up on Mr. Wormers, and I'll get to Mrs. Williams and Mr. Steffen, I do want this board intimately involved in the aquatic center and the items here. Maybe a little bit more than we were with YNC as far as design. These are high-profile projects. Certainly, the auditoriums and the aquatic centers will be architectural something, because I mean, certainly the one at west goes in the front. You know, the one at south will be very visible from City Coast Highway. The one at north is yet to be sited. Certainly the Aquatic Center will be probably one of the signature buildings in town. You know, certainly the security and safety and the science labs and the auditoriums and all those things, I want, if it requires an extra one of these meetings once in a while, I think probably my colleagues would come along for that, so that we're
Yes.
involved in that process. So just to kind of, if I get concurrence with the rest of the members, I would certainly want us to be very involved in that process. And, you know, occasionally we can deal with technical things. So we can get through that and look at that. And I think probably as we go through the process here over the next year, if it takes a couple extra of these meetings, that will be okay for us. Mrs. Reagans.
Yeah, actually, I had a question about 4 different things. So with the pools, we're talking about just a pool, nothing to do with diving platforms or anything in that respect.
And nobody does in the diving anymore because of the liability issues.
Okay, I figured
And
that
you have
was
to
true.
build a diving well to go along with it.
Right, exactly. Okay, secondly, for the science labs, you mentioned smaller furniture, so smaller furniture would be covered by bond funds?
Yes, it is, because if you notice the way those labs are built, they come with it.
Okay, but does that include technology pieces also? Will that be provided by the district?
I'm not sure I know what the technology pieces are.
Computers and screens and that kind of thing in the room?
Screens come with it, so that's just a part. As far as computers, that would probably be through the technology committee,
Okay, so.
not specific to
I
that one
actually was asked by
building.
somebody who was trying to figure out what they could contribute to the projects. And they said, well, are you guys going to buy everything if you build those new buildings and put it into it? So, well, some of it will be
Yeah.
included, I'm sure, but we'll have to work out the
Yeah,
details.
You know, if you really want to see, just go to a middle school and look at that modular, and that's what it is. It's just smaller.
But things like whiteboards, if they wanted that for
That all-
instruction,
that's
all
all
of that would
part
have
of
to
it.
come through technology or
Oh,
through
no,
this
no.
bond construction?
Smartboard, yes. Whiteboard, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Okay.
right.
That helps. Third thing, I haven't been asked about barbed wire, but I have had several people ask about buzzer entries and whether we'd be putting the buzzer type entry into the school so that you have to buzz to get through into the school property. Is that something we're considering at all?
We haven't as of yet, but we certainly can look at that. It's a small item.
Okay. Well, actually, part of the reason it was brought up is because there were some funding sources being asked to provide that, and they weren't sure if it was already going to be in the bond
Well,
or
we
not.
certainly can look at, but it is a very small item in terms of dollars.
Okay. And then the last question is, can, help me with this, can we actually lock in these numbers, Dr. Mannon, or is it somewhat dependent on the interest rates that are, on the market when the bonds do come up? So if we say, like you said, you're going to bring to the January 20th meeting $67 million in 15 and $47 million in 18. If we get to 18 and to get that amount of money would make the rate go up for our tax-paying individuals out there, we would have to alter that amount?
You would. Right now, we don't see that.
Okay. But, so they're not hard and fast, but,
Well, you don't know what the market's going to be within that period of time, but I think folks misinterpret that too.
okay.
From the standpoint of that certainly the market drives some of that, but the bigger piece that drives that is what our home values are.
Right?
And, based on what we have, we do not see home values declining in our community, only increasing. So based on our financial plan, we do not see that
Okay.
at this time. Now, we could have another great recession and that could change.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Stefan.
You were talking about the, the aquatic center and the various competitions. You're referring to high school competitions and local, and those require touchpads and all that kind of thing, right? Are we looking at outside revenue, the competitions that was brought up during some kind, or is it just, are we just considering non-revenue type of things?
That is a good question, and the answer to that is we may be in more demand than we want to be.
Well, that begs the next question. Have we done any kind of study on how much marketing or market availability or how much need for this in the area would be?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we have not, but I can tell you in talking with Dr. Keller at Redondo Beach, they redid their pool. And he was warning me a little bit that when our pool or center actually opens, that we are going to get much more demand than what we ever believed we're going to get, and that is what has happened in Redondo Beach. And that folks who live in other communities outside of Redondo Beach and outside of Torrance are now going to want to use those facilities and, of course, pay for them under the Civic Center Act. But I think he was a little surprised about the demand once they had redone their pool and opened it up. So we have talked a little bit about that.
The Civic Center Act does apply to the Aquatic Center,
It certainly does.
because that was one of the discussions I had at one of the middle schools, was whether our people would get preference in usage. And I said, of course, as part of the Civic
we
Center
will.
Act. That's how
Absolutely.
the TOC students, our programs take precedence over any surrounding,
Absolutely.
whatever. It's like a gym. If
Absolutely.
if one of our organizations want to use our gym and we've suddenly gone to the finals and we need to bump their schedule, they get bumped, and that's how it's done.
No,
So-
you're right. But, I think that, again, when you look at the number of teams that will need to be scheduled, and, oh, by the way, my history is that once you build it, they come. And, that's what we're planning on right now. But what I have seen in other districts where we have built pools is that all of a sudden there are so many kids. And remember, this is a sport where you don't necessarily have to be a great athlete, quite frankly, to participate in. And then there's a great demand for kids who want to do this. And now all of a sudden you have JV programs. And so you not only have the varsity swim teams, both boy and girl, now you have junior varsity, boy and girl. So where we were talking about 16, you may actually have 32.
And every parent I spoke to about this that had any questions about why we're doing Aquatic Center, my very first question was, where did your kid learn how to swim? I learned how to swim in my school, my pools in my hometown, but I learned to be a lifeguard in my high school. And so many of our parents, well, I had to use my neighbor's pool. Our current assemblyman, Mr. Hadley, told me, yeah, we used my neighbor's pool to teach my kid how to swim.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is why we're building this. This is why we're doing this, because we don't have enough
Yeah.
facilities.
So you can see the demand, right away just from our own kids and our own different teams. So, you put that together with the fact that they're, according to folks that I've talked to, the pool and pool time is scarce in all the other surrounding communities of where we are. And then there's going to be a larger demand for rental use under the Civic Center Act.
Mrs. Deutsch.
I just had a quick question. In terms of the selection process for example, the safety features at the individual schools, how is that going to take place, or who's going to make that decision?
I'm chairing a committee, and the committee is made up of a captain in the police department, a sergeant in the police department. We will have an elementary, middle, and high school principal, and we have 2 teachers that are a part of the committee. The committee will begin to meet after the first of the year, and we will go through that. We do have available to us, and this is a question Mrs. Reagan's asked of me the other day. We'll actually look at maps of every school site. Each school site will receive the same product, but not necessarily the same number, because that's based upon what do they actually need. So there would be some school sites that might need more cameras. Obviously, high school does, but there might be a school site that needs more cameras because of its location than another school site because of its location. But we'll review that. We really have professionals who will take a look at that and say, this is where you should put these in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
What,
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
yes,
So, do we know, we have a firm idea of what is currently on our campuses, or it's totally irrelevant?
We do have an idea, well, we have more than an idea. We do know what is on
Okay.
on our campuses. Much of the equipment we have, really, and I want to make sure people understand this, it's the best they could get with the money they had available. But that equipment really does not do what we need done. So you're going to see a much higher quality of camera recording and all of those pieces in what we're going to purchase than what they actually have on a school site.
Have you had a chance to talk to Catherine Castleberry about her camera system? I asked
no,
her,
I haven't
I asked
talked
her how effective it was. She said, I could tell you what time of day someone came up and did, actually, her words were urinated on my wall, but could not possibly tell you whether they're male or female or what they were wearing because the camera wasn't good enough. But they could tell what time of day, and that was all the extent.
And
So,
that's true of what we have.
yeah, and that's where we need
That's
to.
true of the West camera, too. They saw
Yes,
somebody stealing
is.
stuff off of a car, but had no idea who it was and couldn't identify them.
It absolutely is,
It's a
is
huge
correct.
step up in cost to get cameras that can identify
Yeah.
people, but that's part of the reason we went to this trouble.
Yeah, and I think that, again, goes back to the original community committee that I had working on this, who were very clear, look, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And that's why we're, allocating the funds that we're doing. Now, the upside to that, and we are getting their specifications, district we're close to, a little larger than us, just went through the process and bought really high-quality equipment. And in talking with the superintendent, she pointed out that it's made quite a difference in their district. And in one instance, they had a pretty nasty fight at a high school out on their parking lot, and they were able to identify each and every kid that played a role within that fight. And what they did, quite frankly, is when they brought the parents in, they replayed the video for them so that they could see what their son or daughter did. So we will control those parking lots also.
But for things like the emergency containers, if, and I don't even know if this is the case, if a school has just recently purchased one, they would still be replaced?
Well, we never go in, even under Y and Z, and we had something that was new or in good shape and turned right around and spent money to replace it. I
Right.
mean, that doesn't make sense to me. It's never made sense just to say, well, we have the money, so we're going to do it. So we would have to take a look at that. But I can tell you, without any doubt, on the cameras and recording devices, we have nothing in the district that'll be of the quality we're going to purchase.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Mann, a couple of things that came up, and especially one, the auxiliary gyms. We've got two high schools that one we're currently working on, Torrance High School through the planning process, and a second one, West High School, which will be next up. But certainly before 2018, I think, I'm just curious, if we're going to be in there rehabbing the high schools, would we not want to rehab the auxiliary gyms at the same time rather than have two separate projects?
Well, it does make sense the way you just indicated that it would. The problem that we have, it won't work financially, because we can only sell a certain amount of bonds at one particular time. The other piece is, remember with a high school, and this is what we'll look at, because we haven't started planning at West until January. But at a high school, we're generally take 2 years to do it. So West actually won't come under construction until 2016. So right at the end of the tail end of that project may be 2018, and we'd work that auxiliary gym in.
Actually, their auxiliary gym got a little extra work on it, so it's a.
That was courtesy of Dr. Stowe when he was the
Yeah,
principal there.
When he set fire to it, right?
Fire to it, yes, but other than that, okay, was just curious, because I know that the auxiliary gym at Torrance High is in pretty bad shape, so. Okay, well, good, then, we have been through this, so I suspect that we will go out with the new and in with the old, and we'll start talking about measures Y and Z.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Mannon. Good evening, President Lee, esteemed board members, the doctors in the House, District Cabinet, and the thousands of viewing residents of the city of Torrance. As always, it's a pleasure and honor to lead the construction and design team behind me that I'll call up in order, led off by HMC and Jesse Miller to speak to his projects that are funded by Y&Z.
Good evening, Board. So the first two that we have to talk about are Towers Elementary School and Riviera Elementary School. We are ahead of schedule on both projects. Riviera is actually finishing up Phase 4, and we are moving on. They're actually in right now, Phase 5, which is the last phase for Riviera. Towers is completing Phase 4, and Phase 5 will begin after the new year. So we have moved them up from their year-long process that they normally were.
So towers will be done this year?
No, Towers will be done
In
roughly
2015?
March.
Yeah, 2015, yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to original phases were both schools in May, towards the end of summer, or at the beginning of summer. So, and Riviera will be done probably closer to February.
Good, okay, thank you.
Yukon, Edison, Jefferson, we're currently in the state, so we'll be there for a few months. So nothing too new to report. All three projects have done all their site design meetings, their site community meetings, their community presentation meeting. We met with you guys to approve them to go to the state architect, and they've been in there since the end of October. We're anticipating DSA approval hopefully in April of next year, with construction scheduled to start as soon as kids get out in June. Any questions?
I do have one question. You mentioned that construction might be starting as soon as the kids get out in June. I'm aware that this last year, literally the next day, the teachers had to be out of their classrooms. That was very difficult for our teachers. Just put that bee in your bonnet. It was very hard to finish school as well as move all of your stuff out of the room and have it available the next day. So let's be aware of that, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Quiet. Like any remodel, it's a pain in the butt.
Next up, Paul Westberg from Westberg and White.
Every day.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh. North High School. We're almost at the end of construction at North. I think we're over 90% complete. Everything seems to be going quite well. Any questions?
When will we have our ceremony at North High?
Ribbon cutting.
As soon as he gives us the date that he's done. So you can see, he's projecting January 2015, it'll probably be February 2015.
That's great.
Sound good, Don? Okay.
Is that ahead of time?
Yes.
And we're not rushing too much and forgetting things or not completing things or?
Never.
Just asking.
No, and no.
Okay.
Never.
I might as
Never.
well, what the
Our
heck?
punch lists were so good.
Thanks.
Jeez.
And those palm trees are gorgeous.
Yes.
Look really nice.
And the one blue column is still there.
Love that blue column.
Yeah, I
love
love that
that
blue
blue
column.
column.
Architectural decision.
Element.
Yes, absolute element.
Element.
Torrance High School, as you know, we've completed the senior patio a little while ago, and we're continuing to go after some state funding to help deal with the unexpected expenditures on that. We're in DSA. We're planning on getting out of DSA towards the end of January. We're on schedule for our tentative, as you can see, construction schedule starting 3/15. We're going to be bidding the project. We're doing everything that we think we can on that particular campus. We are the one auditorium that does exist, and we're hopeful that maybe we can intertwine those two together as we progress through that. And I get to meet with that really neat young lady who is the head of theater arts there at Torrance High School. I think her dad is also, if I recall, there. So
Slater.
we, when we did our original planning on that, we kind of teased about the what-ifs. We had no envisionment that the community would do what they happily have done. And so I get to see a big smile on her face as we talk about what we can do over and above just modernization. All right? Lincoln, Carr, Casimir, all in the DSA at your approval last month. It has been there more than a month, and we haven't got any responses from DSA saying that we're void of all the things that we're supposed to submit, so we feel positive. We have A numbers attached to all the projects right now. We just do not have plan checkers allocated for the project, and there again, we're on track, so you're going to be having a district that's going to be very, very busy middle or so of 2015, not counting what we just talked about earlier. And as a side note, we successfully completed about 75 schools over at Long Beach Unified pertinent to cameras and security. And so I learned a lot of big lessons. One of the things our engineers, electrical engineers, have now, because all districts are doing this, is that they have a complete camera cart that they roll around on each one of the sites with a big periscope to be at the level of what a camera might be. So we make a lot of shots on each site as to what would be the field graphically that we could show to each one of the sites, and then create a package, and the district and the site people sign off on where they would like to be able to have things. So we're not entering into something unique. We're entering into something that has present-day technology, which certainly is what we all need. Any questions? Very good. Thank you very much.
That's all there is to report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Mann is like a vampire, he never ages, but we really should get a different picture for your questions and comments.
I like that. I like it.
Well, you know, he's
It's a good
looking
picture,
off
but it's
into
just
the
been-
horizon. He looks like a visionary.
Because we've
there.
been doing it for what, 6-7 years now, we've seen that picture, so.
I've only seen it for 2. I like it.
He doesn't age, he doesn't change at all.
Since 2009.
Yeah, you don't change at all, no doubt.
Yeah, I
but-
saw a picture of him from Phoenix. Looked exactly the same as he does now.
The painting in the attic.
Yeah, pretty much. Anything? Anyway,
Dorian Gray, you don't know what Dorian Gray means?
I said I do.
Oh, okay.
okay, good. Anyway, this is a public meeting. So, I guess it's that time for number 8, is it?
No.
No, you skipped.
Oh, no, that's right. No, where's right, the resolution. Approval, okay, so we gotta approve the first one, which will need a motion, discussion action items for the approval of the sale of the bonds.
All right, so move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a point to clarify, this, what you're approving is the schedule. The actual sale of bonds is through a resolution. It'll be on your January 20th meeting. The presentation I made tonight will be posted on our website under bonds so that folks can go to that and see that.
Okay, good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item 2, approval to adopt resolution AS 06-14/15 of the Board of Education for execution and delivery of the site lease, sublease, and construction services agreement and other acts relating to the construction of Torrance High School interim housing project with Balfour Beatty Construction LLC. Motion second.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we've got to the end of it. Anybody's got anything else to say, or we can send everybody off into the night?
One quick thing.
Okay.
Real quick. I just want to, some of us been sitting on this board for anywhere from 12 years or coming on to it, or 8 or whatever, and now you, and
And now you.
no, I mean, and I'm looking at the date, and now I'm looking at the dates of the bonds that we've had, and this board, for the next, how many years will it have, how many years has it, and will it be continuing building off these bonds? And it's amazing. It's going to be, some of you guys are going to come in here, it's going to be like those people that landed the thing on the asteroid. They started when they were 20 and they retired at the end of it, and, it's amazing. It's just amazing how much work is going to be done in the future and how much work has already been done in the past. And so,
Exciting.
and some of us will leave way
And
before.
Charlie can build anything in 12 months.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Steffen. We appreciate that. It's really been a team project throughout over these last years and into the future. I think you can really see a difference at our school sites, and the level of things that we're doing with T&U certainly takes it to another level beyond what we are doing with just simple modernization.
And certainly as one who was involved in the 90s passing Measure R and all the stuff that came after it, I'm certainly not hearing what I heard about Measure R as it progressed. There's none of that conversation, so hats off to everybody out in the audience for executing. Yeah, because, you know, that was the hurdle that we had with Y and Z, was to prove to everybody that we wouldn't, you know, that we could execute, and we did execute. And it wasn't because of us, because of you guys and these people. And so that certainly made T&U that much easier to pass, and certainly the community supported us again. And as I've said, this is probably the last one for a while, so we can get done with this and the community can enjoy it. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Done.